Tony D and Little Joan with a screenwriter's rant on Downtown Owl, a movie about a woman who goes back to, I think, where she's from to be a teacher. And it's 1983, 84. And, it's just about her life and small town life. And Vanessa Hudgens is in it, playing the slutty teacher. So the thumbnail's kind of funny. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. I guess it's just like a small town life movie in the 80s. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Check out my books. Links in the description. Comedy horror in South Jersey. It's the Pineys, books 1 through 13. Sorry, 14. God. Available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. Lily Robb imbues the film with heart-rending radiance. I'm not sure what the heart-rending is about, because I guess her husband died or she's divorced. I can't decide because they don't really tell you. Her husband, she does mention the husband was working on his PhD and she was moving here, so it sounds like he's alive. But she's also trying to date, so I guess he's alive and she's divorced, or he's dead. I don't know. Rabe gives a wildly uninhibited performance. I would disagree. I mean, I don't think it's bad, but it just feels like a one of these movies you would see on, like Hallmark about women. And this is always a bad sign. They're advertising the music, and the music does not sound good in the trailer. T-Bone Burnett, not sure who that is. Elvis Costello, I know. He's kind of 80s. Had some 80s hits. Margot Price, don't know her. Charlie Crockett, sounds familiar. And Joe Henry. That's the best you could do for the 80s music. I think you could have done better for 80s music. But look, you may not have the budget, whatever. But you got Vanessa Hudgens, and you're promoting this blonde woman. She seems fine. Ed Harris is in it. Ed Harris. So I guess the choice was Ed Harris or maybe like a Van Halen song from 1984, off the 1984 album, maybe. I don't know. Downtown Owl. I don't like the name. I think that's the name of the town. Digital, April 23rd. Buy or rent. Rated R for adult situations. I'm not quite sure what the adult situations are, unless it's her hooking up or Vanessa. We get to see a hot scene with Vanessa Hudgens going topless. That would be cool. So, it looks kind of boring. It looks kind of like a high school movie, but it doesn't focus on the high schoolers. It focuses... Downtown Owl oozes with style? What style are you talking about? Movie takes place in the 80s. I'm not seeing too much of 80s stuff other than landlines. It takes place in the Midwest, so it's like the Midwest is, a rural area, so it's always behind the curve a little bit in terms of the styles at the time, and some of it never changes. So like, oozing with style. What style? I don't even know what you're talking about. I think you're pushing this too hard. Now, Vanessa Hudgens, I like her character. She's kind of loose and crazy. And here she is, busted into the bathroom stall to tell her, hey, this is where we go to party. Oh, I got a new friend. Cool. And then there's this scene where she's driving down the street and then gets caught in a snowstorm, because apparently that's a thing in the Midwest, and then they become best friends and go out partying, even though she's a high school teacher. But this is 1984. Like, back then, high school teachers could get their drink on and go have a good time because they weren't going to end up on the internet. Now it's a little dicier. You'd have to be way more careful, probably go to the next town, not do anything too crazy, because somebody might have a phone and you could lose your job. But, I don't really see the appeal of this, a self-enclosed world that's bursting at the seams. I'm not really seeing it. It's not unappealing. I'll say that it looks well made, but it feels like it's a movie that's about, I don't know, 20 years too late. Like, a movie that takes place in the mid 80s should have come out in the mid 2000s. About 20 years. Like, I'm at the age, I was in high school when this movie takes place, right? So I could maybe relate to the high school characters a little bit, but I wouldn't be able to relate as much to the adults per se. Although I graduated high school within a few years, I could kind of, but like, they're in a different place. So this is a woman who's in her, at least in her late 20s, early 30s, dealing with, like, I think being divorced. They don't even say. I think it's based on a book, but it's late to make a book like, it's late in the game. 40 years later, 40 years ago we're doing. Okay. It seems like a long time ago for what audience exactly? Oh, middle-aged women. Those middle-aged women weren't even born. Okay? Or they were like 5. So they don't remember the 80s. They probably remember the 90s. And by then, the technology's different, the music's different, it's a little different. And again, because you're in the Midwest, you're kind of really almost like in the 70s, really. Decades didn't just like flip over and then, we hit the 80s and we all had hair from The Cure and, started listening to, Boy George or whatever. It was like a slow roll. By the time we were in the 90s, like, everything 80s was then big, and then it was getting old, and then we started rolling into the 90s. So, like, now to the movie's credit, it doesn't really get caught up in a lot of those trends, but, again, I'm not quite sure why Hollywood seems so obsessed with the 80s now. The pattern is every 20 years. 20 years is the nostalgia moment. So the kind of stuff you should be doing is stuff that happened in the early 2000s, because that's the stuff that's nostalgic now to people in their 30s and 40s. And they're the movie-going public. The people who are old enough to remember this, they've aged out. Do they go to the movies? Sure. Will they go see this? No. Now it's streaming, and you might argue, well, it's streaming. Okay. But you seem to have spent a lot of money here. And you're putting it on streaming and then promoting the music. It seems really bad. Like back in the day, like remember Singles? That was a big hit movie in the 90s. They promoted the soundtrack. The Crow, the original Crow movie. Soundtrack was huge. And they promoted it. That was a time when soundtracks sold. Soundtracks don't really sell anymore. It's not really a thing. Not even sure why they're promoting it. Is the story of that week you needed to promote the soundtrack? I mean, what are you going to get out of... I mean, one could argue, well, I'll buy the movie and then I can hear the songs on the movie. You can search on the internet in 10 seconds, get all the music from this movie. 10 seconds. So, I don't know. It doesn't seem that engaging. It seems like a weird thing to greenlight. But it also seems like kind of like a hotel movie, mostly aimed at women. So, I don't know. First act, she comes home to her small little town. She's not having a great time. She meets Vanessa. They become best friends, go out drinking. She's trying to get her to date. It's not really working out. It's about her trials and tribulations. She eventually kind of falls for this dude who's very quiet and standoffish. But eventually she sort of wins him over and enjoys life in a small town. And there's a couple of subplots there to get thrown into the mix. Ed Harris plays her dad, I guess. And she eventually lives happily ever after, living back in her small town. I'm going to guess. And there's a crying scene because it's aimed at women. All right. So no write-up from Sony. What the hell are you greenlighting, Sony? I don't get it. The Spider-Man movie, gigantic hit, a beast of a hit. Ever since, it's like, what is Sony greenlighting? who the hell's running this show? But okay. It's called Downtown Al. Vanessa Hudgens and Ed Harris. Ladies. And that's it for me, Tony D. And Little Joan. Gripey Little Joan. Check us out on Odysee, Bitchute, and Rumble for our more bass takes. If you can find a more bass take, Joan, I say, take it. I will be at the South Jersey Geek Fest this Saturday from 10 to 5 in Woodbury Heights, New Jersey at the Ridgeway High School. Hope to see you there. I will have book 14 of the Pineys. We'll see you tomorrow.